In the winter of 1823, at a remote seminary in Pennsylvania, 15 young men studying for the ministry died within 6 weeks of each other. Every death followed the same horrifying pattern: violent convulsions, speaking in tongues, and a peculiar blackening of the fingernails that physicians had never before seen. Officially, the cause was listed as consumption, but the local doctor who examined the bodies refused to sign the death certificates. He claimed the symptoms matched no known disease. And more disturbing still, he discovered something in their blood that made him burn his medical notes and flee the county that very night. Immediately, church authorities sealed the seminary, forbidding anyone from entering the grounds. The 15 bodies were buried in unmarked graves behind the chapel. For 2 centuries, the Presbyterian Church has refused to discuss what happened at Whitmore Seminary. But recently discovered letters from a surviving student reveal a truth so disturbing, it explains why some secrets are meant to stay buried forever. Now, before we continue with the story of Whitmore Seminary and uncover what really killed those 15 young men, I need to tell you something important. This channel isn't for everyone, only for the bravest souls who dare to seek the truth behind America's darkest mysteries. Few channels dare to tell the stories we tell here. These are stories that have been buried by institutions and forgotten by time. If you've made it this far, you're not like most people. You're someone who needs to know what others are afraid to discover. So, hit that subscribe button and join the select few who know these secrets, and tell me in the comments what state you're listening from. Are you brave enough to hear mysteries from your own backyard? Now, let's return to that cursed winter in Pennsylvania, where something far more sinister than disease was claiming young lives. Our story begins in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, where the Presbyterian Church had established Whitmore Seminary in 1819. Named after Reverend Josiah Whitmore, a prominent minister who died fighting in the Revolutionary War, the seminary was built to train the next generation of Presbyterian ministers for the expanding American frontier. The institution sat on 200 acres of pristine woodland. Its main building was constructed of local limestone, with a small chapel that could seat 50 people. Surrounding the main complex were dormitories, a dining hall, faculty housing, and a working farm that provided food for the community, all connected by cobblestone paths winding through towering oak and maple trees. The seminary attracted young men from across Pennsylvania and neighboring states, drawn by its reputation for rigorous theological education and affordable tuition. Most students came from farming families or small towns, eager to serve God and bring civilization to the wild territories beyond the Appalachian Mountains. The curriculum was demanding. Students studied Greek and Latin, biblical exegesis, systematic theology, homiletics, church history, and practical ministry skills. They attended chapel twice daily, maintained strict schedules, and were expected to live lives of exemplary moral conduct. The selection process for students was rigorous, requiring letters of recommendation from local ministers, evidence of academic preparation, and a detailed testimony of their calling to ministry. The Presbyterian Church took seriously its responsibility to train godly men for the frontier, where ministers often served multiple congregations across vast distances and faced challenges requiring both theological knowledge and practical wisdom. In the autumn of 1823, 43 students were enrolled at Whitmore Seminary. The eldest was 28-year-old Marcus Hartwell, a former schoolteacher from Lancaster County who had felt called to ministry after his wife died in childbirth. Marcus was a serious, contemplative man who had read extensively in theology and philosophy before coming to the seminary. His fellow students respected him for his maturity and often sought his counsel. The youngest was barely 18, Timothy Brennan, the son of Irish immigrants who had scraped together every penny to send their boy to seminary. Timothy's father had died in a mining accident when the boy was 14, and his mother had worked as a seamstress for 4 years to save enough for his education. Timothy carried the weight of his family's sacrifices, often studying late into the night by candlelight. Between them were farmers' sons like Samuel Brewster, whose family had worked the same land in Lancaster County for 3 generations. Samuel was known for his robust health and cheerful disposition, always ready with a joke or encouraging word. There was also Peter Cunningham, a quiet young man from western Pennsylvania who had been raised by his grandfather after his parents died of fever. Peter was intensely pious, spending hours each day in private prayer. James Morrison came from a well-to-do Philadelphia family that had initially opposed his decision to enter the ministry. His father, a successful merchant, had wanted James to join the family business, but the young man had felt an irresistible call to serve God. James was articulate and well-educated, with a particular gift for languages. Thomas Milliken, whose family had settled in Pittsburgh in the early 1800s, was known for his intellectual curiosity and his tendency to ask probing questions that sometimes made his professors uncomfortable. Thomas had read widely beyond the required curriculum and was fascinated by the theological controversies beginning to emerge in American Presbyterianism. David Crane, who would later become the sole survivor of the group's terrible ordeal, was a practical young man from a farming family in central Pennsylvania. He had been drawn to ministry not by dramatic religious experience, but by a steady conviction that God was calling him to serve. David was well liked by his classmates for his reliability and common sense. The head of the seminary was Dr. Cornelius Ashford, a stern but fair man in his 50s who had studied at Princeton Seminary under the renowned theologian Archibald Alexander. Dr. Ashford had been personally recruited by the Presbyterian Church to establish Whitmore Seminary, and he brought with him a reputation for scholarly excellence and pastoral wisdom. Dr. Ashford lived on campus with his wife, Margaret, and their teenage daughter, Sarah. Margaret Ashford was a cultured woman who had been educated at a female seminary in Philadelphia, and she took an active interest in the welfare of the students. Sarah, 18 years old and possessed of both beauty and intelligence, was beloved by the students for her kind nature and sharp wit. The seminary's faculty included Professor Jonathan Hartley, who taught Greek and Hebrew and was known for his exacting standards and dry wit. There was also Professor William Sterling, who taught church history and homiletics. Professor Sterling was a gifted preacher, and his lectures were among the most popular at the seminary. The autumn of 1823 had been particularly harsh. Early snows had fallen in October, and by November, the seminary was already isolated by drifts that made travel difficult. This isolation was not entirely unwelcome, as it created an atmosphere of intensive study and spiritual reflection. Life at the seminary followed a strict schedule designed to promote both academic excellence and spiritual growth. Students rose at 5 in the morning for private devotions. Morning prayers were followed by breakfast at 6, a simple meal of porridge, bread, butter, and milk, eaten in silence while a student read from a devotional work. Classes began at 7 and continued until noon. Afternoons were reserved for study and preparation, with a break for physical exercise when weather permitted. Evening chapel was held at 6, attended by all students and faculty. After chapel, students gathered for communal study time in the library or their dormitory common rooms. Students were expected to be in their rooms by 9, though many continued studying privately until much later. The dormitories were spartanly furnished but comfortable enough, with each student having a small room containing a bed, desk, chair, washstand, and small bookshelf. The surrounding community of Millbrook was small but supportive of the seminary's mission. The town consisted of about 300 souls, mostly farmers and craftsmen, who provided goods and services to the seminary. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came on the morning of December 3, 1823. Thomas Milliken failed to appear for morning chapel. This was highly unusual. When his roommate, David Crane, went to check on him, he found Thomas writhing on his bed, his body contorting in violent spasms while unintelligible words poured from his lips. But what struck David most was not the convulsions or the strange utterances, it was Thomas's fingernails, which had turned completely black, as if dipped in ink. David immediately called for help. Within minutes, several classmates had gathered, their faces pale with shock as they witnessed their friend's suffering. The convulsions were unlike anything they had ever seen. Thomas's back arched so severely that his body formed an almost perfect bridge, and his limbs jerked with such violence that it took 3 students to hold him down. Dr. Ashford arrived within minutes, visibly shaken by what he observed. Thomas's eyes had rolled back until only the whites were visible, and the words pouring from his mouth sounded like Latin, but twisted into something blasphemous. Dominus viscum infernum, Thomas repeated, his voice growing more guttural. Corpus diaboli anima peritita. Dr. Ashford felt a chill run down his spine. These were inversions of sacred liturgical phrases. Dr. Ashford summoned the local physician, Dr. Edmund Whitley, who lived in the nearby town of Millbrook. A messenger was dispatched on horseback through the snow-covered roads. While they waited, Dr. Ashford led the gathered students in prayer, though their voices trembled with fear. Dr. Whitley arrived within 2 hours, his medical bag in hand. He had been practicing medicine for over 30 years, but what he witnessed that day would haunt him for the rest of his life. Thomas's symptoms defied everything Dr. Whitley knew. The young man's pulse was rapid and irregular. His breathing was labored, accompanied by a strange whistling sound. His skin had taken on a peculiar grayish pallor, and dark veins pulsed beneath the surface. The black discoloration had spread from his fingernails to his entire hands, and similar dark patches were appearing on his neck and around his eyes. Dr. Whitley administered laudanum to calm the convulsions and applied cold compresses. He tried bleeding Thomas, but the blood was darker than normal and coagulated almost immediately. He attempted to induce vomiting, but Thomas's stomach produced only a foul-smelling black bile. Throughout the day, word of Thomas's condition spread. Students gathered in small groups, whispering prayers and theories. Some suggested consumption, others wondered about a venomous creature. A few of the more superstitious muttered about divine judgment or demonic possession, though Dr. Ashford quickly silenced such talk. As evening approached, Thomas's condition deteriorated. The convulsions became more violent, and the blasphemous Latin gave way to sounds that seemed barely human. Sarah Ashford insisted on helping to care for Thomas, bringing fresh water and clean linens. She was struck by how cold his skin felt, despite the fever. The other students maintained a prayer vigil throughout the night. Thomas Milliken died at 3 a.m. on December 4th, exactly 21 hours after the first convulsions began. His final moments were marked by a sudden return of consciousness and clarity. He looked directly at Dr. Whitley with an expression of profound terror and regret. His final words, spoken just before his death, were recorded by Dr. Whitley, the book in the chapel. God forgive us all. After speaking these words, Thomas's eyes closed, his breathing stopped, and his body relaxed into the stillness of death. The black discoloration began to fade almost immediately. The funeral was held 2 days later. Dr. Ashford delivered a moving eulogy. But even as they mourned, a sense of unease settled over the seminary community. The strange nature of his illness, the rapidity of his decline, and his final cryptic words had shaken everyone. Dr. Whitley assured them it was likely an isolated incident, perhaps spoiled food or an unknown toxin. But his words rang hollow. The winter seemed to press in with renewed intensity after Thomas's death. Students began to complain of strange dreams and difficulty sleeping. Some reported hearing footsteps in the corridors at night. What none of them realized was that Thomas Milliken's death was only the beginning. 3 days after Thomas's funeral, on December 9th, another student began showing the same terrifying symptoms. James Morrison, Thomas's study partner and closest friend, woke his roommate with violent convulsions. The convulsions began at exactly 3 a.m, the same time Thomas had died. The pattern was identical. The same black fingernails appeared within hours. The same twisted Latin phrases poured from his lips. The same grayish pallor spread across his skin. James's roommate immediately recognized the symptoms and ran to fetch Dr. Ashford and Dr. Whitley. Dr. Whitley was summoned again, with a growing sense of dread. He had spent the days since Thomas's death researching every medical text he could find, but nothing offered an explanation. As he examined James, he was struck by the precise similarity to Thomas's condition. The symptoms were identical, progressing at exactly the same rate. It was as if James was following a predetermined script. James Morrison died exactly 21 hours after his symptoms began. His final words were identical: the book in the chapel. God forgive us all. The precision of the timing and the repetition of the same final message sent a chill through everyone present. Dr. Whitley now suspected contagion and ordered quarantine procedures. The dormitory was sealed and fumigated with sulfur smoke. The students were now openly terrified. 2 deaths in a week, both following the same horrifying pattern, had shattered their sense of safety. Dr. Ashford attempted to maintain order by increasing chapel services and encouraging prayer. He wrote to the Presbyterian Church authorities in Philadelphia, informing them of the situation. The response was swift. Reverend Dr. Jonathan Blackwood, a senior administrator, was dispatched immediately to investigate. But before Dr. Blackwood could arrive, the pattern repeated itself again. On December 12th, it happened a third time. The victim was Samuel Brewster, known for his robust health and cheerful disposition. His illness sent shockwaves through the community. The pattern was identical. Violent convulsions beginning at 3 in the morning, blackened fingernails, twisted Latin phrases, grayish pallor, and death exactly 21 hours later. Samuel's final words were the same: the book in the chapel. God forgive us all. Dr. Whitley had now witnessed 3 deaths that followed the same impossible pattern. He began to document every aspect, hoping to find some clue. The arrival of Dr. Blackwood on December 15th brought some relief. Dr. Blackwood was a man in his 60s with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes. He immediately took charge. Dr. Blackwood concluded they were dealing with an unidentified contagious disease. He ordered the institution quarantined immediately, no one allowed to enter or leave until the epidemic had run its course. The quarantine transformed Whitmore Seminary from a place of learning into a prison of fear. The 4th death came on December 18th, claiming Peter Cunningham, a quiet student known for his intense piety. His illness began at exactly 3 in the morning, following the same terrifying pattern. He died exactly 21 hours later, with the same final words. The mention of the book in the chapel now intrigued both Dr. Whitley and Dr. Blackwood. Dr. Blackwood wanted to search the chapel, but Dr. Ashford was reluctant, seeing it as superstitious speculation. By December 20th, the seminary was in the grip of full panic. Students refused meals, convinced the food was contaminated. They huddled together, praying constantly. The faculty struggled to maintain order. That night, the first break in the pattern occurred. David Crane, Thomas's roommate, approached Dr. Whitley with a confession. He revealed that he and several others had been part of a secret study group that met in the chapel after evening prayers. They had been reading a book Thomas discovered in a hidden compartment behind the altar. The book was bound in what appeared to be human skin. The pages were ancient parchment, and the text was a mixture of Latin and unfamiliar symbols. Thomas had found it in early October. The group had consisted of 6 students: Thomas, James, Samuel, Peter, David, and Marcus Hartwell. They had been studying the book for nearly 3 months, implementing spiritual practices outside Orthodox Presbyterian doctrine. Initially, they felt spiritually enlightened, experiencing vivid dreams and improved academic performance. But they also began experiencing physical symptoms, headaches, insomnia, strange sensations. They grew spiritually proud, looking down on their classmates. Marcus Hartwell had begun to have doubts, experiencing nightmares where angelic beings revealed themselves as sinister. He wanted to end the meetings, but Thomas convinced him it was a test of faith. The book disappeared 3 days before Thomas's death. The group panicked. Thomas became paranoid, accusing others of stealing it. In the days following, their symptoms worsened. They shared nightmares of being pursued by dark figures. David's revelation was staggering. All the victims had been part of this secret group. Their deaths might be connected to the book. Dr. Whitley shared this with Dr. Blackwood immediately. Dr. Blackwood ordered a full investigation. He uncovered that nearly half the student body knew of the secret meetings but were too frightened to speak. Faculty reported changes in the group's behavior. They had become argumentative and dismissive of orthodox teaching. Dr. Blackwood ordered a search of the chapel. They found the hidden compartment, with traces of wax, ashes, and faint markings. Behind the altar, they found geometric patterns carved into the floor. They also found Thomas's handwritten notes, copied from the book. The notes described rituals for opening gates between worlds, requiring 6 participants as vessels. The ritual promised enhanced spiritual powers but warned of severe consequences for those unworthy or who attempted to abandon the process. Dr. Whitley realized the group had unknowingly been performing this ritual. Their study had initiated a process now claiming their lives. The fifth death occurred on December 21st, claiming Marcus Hartwell. His death followed the same pattern, but his final words were different. He spoke of being chosen and marked for the harvest. David Crane was now the only surviving member of the group. Consumed with guilt and terror, he was convinced he would be next. Under immense psychological pressure, he decided to search for answers. On December 22nd, David explored the seminary's basement. Behind a bricked-up wall, he discovered a hidden chamber filled with items predating the seminary's construction. There were documents revealing the true identity of Josiah Whitmore. The real Josiah Whitmore had been a minister involved in occult practices, expelled from the Presbyterian Church. In 1781, he attempted a ritual to open communication between worlds, requiring 6 volunteers from his congregation. The ritual went wrong, and all 6 died horribly, with symptoms including blackened extremities and blasphemous utterances. Whitmore was convicted of witchcraft and murder and executed in 1782, not dying heroically in the Revolutionary War. His personal library and ritual implements were hidden away. The land where Whitmore Seminary was built was the same property where Whitmore conducted his occult practices and where the 6 congregants died. The mysterious book was Whitmore's personal grimoire. It had been placed in the chapel as a trap. The ritual required the life force of 6 participants to open gateways between worlds. David realized he and his friends had unknowingly repeated Whitmore's experiment. The grimoire contained instructions for breaking the ritual, but it warned that attempting to do so would cause the immediate death of any remaining vessels. David faced an impossible choice. On December 23rd, David revealed everything to Dr. Whitley and Dr. Blackwood. They decided to attempt the counter-ritual that night, adapting it to Orthodox Christian theology. They gathered in the chapel at midnight. As they burned the grimoire page by page, the spiritual oppression intensified. The temperature dropped, shadows moved, and grinding sounds came from beneath the floor. David described visions of his dead friends trapped between worlds. As the last page burned, David screamed. The black discoloration spread up his arms, his body convulsed, and his voice became inhuman. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The oppression lifted. David collapsed, unconscious but breathing, the black discoloration fading away. David survived but was forever changed. The deaths ended, but the seminary never recovered. The Presbyterian Church, faced with the truth, closed the institution permanently. The buildings were abandoned and eventually sold. Dr. Whitley's medical practice never recovered. He moved away and died of liver disease in 1835, haunted by nightmares. Dr. Blackwood returned to Philadelphia, profoundly affected, becoming an expert on combating occult influences. David Crane spent his life as a minister, never speaking publicly of the events. He served rural congregations, focusing on humility and orthodox teaching, forever marked by his experience. The story of Whitmore Seminary is a chilling reminder of the dangers of spiritual pride and forbidden knowledge. It shows how past evils can influence the present, and how the pursuit of extraordinary spiritual power can lead to destruction. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed, or are there still secrets buried in the ruins of that Pennsylvania seminary? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share with someone who loves mysteries. Until next time, remember, some secrets are meant to stay buried, and some knowledge is too dangerous to seek.